ahead and take some phone calls. We've got Russ in San Antonio.
I've got a little story for you that you guys are going to love. Okay, I asked my best friend to call in because it's his story, but he totally refused. He said, no way. We grew up together. I actually introduced him to his wife. So he wouldn't lie to me about something big.
Okay.
I have no reason to doubt him, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
He's a doctor, okay? He's a very well-known doctor, and a few years ago I got upset because he actually went to Africa for a couple of months to take part in a medical study.
Okay.
And I didn't know what it was at the time until I saw the pictures when he came back. And he told me they specifically went to East Africa to determine that circumcision can reduce HIV transmission.
Okay.
Not that they went to see. He said they went to determine that. In other words, he swears to this day it's a completely dishonest study. He said they got 1/3 of the way through the study, and their results were not favorable in their eyes. In other words, they determined that anyone who has smegma is less likely to contract HIV. That would be any man with foreskin or any woman with a labium. So apparently they stopped everything 1/3 of the way through the study and switched the whole process. And what they did was basically take about 1,000 uncircumcised Kenyans who were about 70% HIV positive, 1,000 circumcised Kenyans who were 20% positive, and put them in rooms. And when the European fact checkers, came along, they said, wow, 70% of the uncircumcised Kenyans are HIV positive. Okay, so they took this to the UN, they took this to the World Health Organization, which basically bought it up. They said basically the next day, the UN now advocates circumcising Africans. But the thing is, they never completed their study. They even admit that in their writings. They also said it would be unethical for anyone to try to disprove them. It would be unethical. In other words, if you went and tried to disprove them in East Africa and did a similar study, you'd be scorned in the medical community for being
because
unethical.
not just because you're going against them, but because if it's true, you would actually be doing harm by doing the study. That's what their objection was.
Well, he tells me there's 4 ways in which you can know that this is a lie.
Okay.
Number 1, you look at the history. Every 20 years, physicians come up with a new excuse for circumcision. And within a decade, it's always disproven. And they have to come up with a new one.
Right.
HIV is the latest one. I would recommend you guys don't buy into this right away. Number 2, he said, they don't want anyone else to do a similar study. That's proof that they're lying. Number 3, most other legitimate medical organizations are contesting and challenging the WHO now, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, which basically won't put it in their yearly literature, saying it's BS, and they don't want it to be used as an excuse to circumcise American infants. And number 4, the WHO said it, so you have to question it. And, I didn't believe this at first, but when I Googled HIV circumcision fraud, HIV circumcision debunk, there's apparently a lot of doctors, there were dozens of doctors in this study, a lot of them totally disagree with the findings. And I know, Matt, you said about it, actually it was a year ago, you said HIV prevention might be the only legitimate reason to circumcise someone, but I'm here to say apparently that's not true, because I believe my friend 100%. He would not lie to me. Well, he says that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Truly, I'm not.
Oh, no.
But apparently there's something going on here. There's some sort of circumcision agenda, and it may be monetary. Because I once knew a doctor who told me that all doctors know there's no benefit to circumcision, but they get $300 every time they do it.
Yeah.
So they try to...
Jen a year ago did a show on this very subject, her first one,
right.
And covered some of this. That's probably the show you're talking about, where I said that
May 4th.
that this may be the one and only case.
Matt, I love you, but you were wrong.
Well, I was right because I said it may be based on the data that I had at the time.
Right.
I wasn't making an assertion that this is a case where circumcision is the best way to go.
Matt, you're the most open-minded person. You always look at evidence.
Yeah, and while I haven't checked yours out,
I know
I don't find it unbelievable, and it's certainly something worth looking into further. So
he's in the room with me, and he refuses to call in because he's scared.
Well, ask him if he would.
Fine.
Ask him if he would email me.
Okay, he's willing to email you links to other doctors who were there, but that's all he's willing to do. He won't even say his name.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know.
Now,
I don't fault him for it if he,
No.
you know, we're talking about his potential livelihood.
We're talking about the United Nations. Everybody disagrees.
I'm not afraid of the UN.
Yeah.
They don't want to take on the UN.
The
Yeah.
UN doesn't want to take
Can
on
I
the
ask
UN.
you guys a question?
Yeah.
Why would anyone want to advocate circumcising the world? If
Apart
there's no
from
real proof.
apart from money and the fact that it's become kind of mythical in the aesthetic area, the only justification I can come up with is religious.
Well, there is a psychological component to this. And you see this actually in Africa in cultures that circumcise women, and I use that circumcise women not to trivialize what's done.
That's a
but-
labiodectomy.
Yeah, just to,
It's mutilation.
yeah, it's all
Well, if you
mutilation.
cut off the clitoris, that's totally different. A labia
Well,
is
it's-
technically foreskin, so if you cut that off, that's fine, but it's not what they do.
Well, actually, mostly that's what they do. The most severe forms of female genital mutilation are also the rarest forms, and the most severe forms of male circumcision are worse than most of what happens to women and girls, which, like I said, is not to trivialize any of that, because
no.
none of it's right.
I'm just saying none of it's ever been proven to have any medical justification, and every
Yeah.
time they come up with one, it's disproven within 1 decade.
Right. Now, I guess I have a couple of points here. One is that if you go to Africa and you look at the cultures that practice some form of genital cutting on women, first of all, there's no culture that cuts women that does not also cut men.
Right.
So those two are linked. The second thing is that if you look at who's cutting the women and who's advocating it, it's other women. And so you ask yourself, why would any woman advocate doing this to her daughter? And part of it is that they have to justify what was done to them. And so I think a very similar thing is going on when
I
we're talking
agree.
about male circumcision. There's a lot of men who advocate it. And if you ask parents, and people have asked parents who are in the process of making this decision for a male child, a lot of the men, it comes down to, well, I think he should look like me.
Yeah.
Well, if
You know-
you talk to a circumcised man, show him a uncircumcised penis, they say that the immediate reaction is he has to make fun of it. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
inevitable, and it's almost like, boy, that's more complete than mine. I better make fun of that and say that it's inferior in some way. My parents could not have degraded me. They must have enhanced me in some way. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go my whole life saying I was enhanced, when in fact might not be the case.
I'd say it's almost certainly not the case that things get better when you cut parts of a functional organ off.
Apparently, it's better to have your entire birthday suit minus your umbilical cord.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
At least as far as we can demonstrate medically. Russ, I gotta let you go, but thanks a
ahead.
lot for calling in, and have your friend feel free to send us an email with whatever information or links he wants to. We may come back and touch on this topic more as soon as we get more reliable information
Well,
than a
congratulations,
phone call,
Mr.
no
President.
slight to you.
Right.
But
Thank
thanks,
you.
Russ.
All right, take care.